Afternoon, zombie survivors. We're here to review Prince of Persia Classic, which has just been released for Xbox Live Arcade.
I remember playing it when we were little, and which means I was expecting spikes and lots of falling down and baggy pants. And I got all those things, and it looked really great too, without being so focused on graphics that it was showy.
The gameplay is pretty much the same as the original Prince of Persia, although they've done a couple of little things that actually make it a little nicer to control, because those old computer keyboard controls, you know, weren't going to translate exactly to the Xbox 360 controller. So they did a good job of updating a few things here and there to make it smoother.
And one thing that I was probably most impressed with, and actually I think this goes for both of us, was the combat. It's extremely simple. You have a parry button and an attack, and you would think that would be, you know, kind of boring, but it actually is kind of hard. It gets kind of difficult at some point, at least in terms of your reaction time to the people you're fighting, and that was really good that it wasn't sort of a lull in the game. You still feel the same sort of anxiety you get when you're trying not to get impaled.
The older game all had black backgrounds, so it was kind of sparse looking, but at the same time, you know, the new updated graphics are great, but in some ways I do think in some areas they made it a little too bright. Like, I remember the original game being a little spooky and scary because it's all this black background, and then there's these spikes and slicers and pits and all these things that kill you. And the new game has all that, but there's a lot of sort of bright torches in this dungeon, and everything's kind of a little too well lit for me.
Yeah, at times it was a little, I mean, they were great, but at times it was a little too pretty. I mean, it's not supposed to be a comforting environment, exactly.
Right. So I thought that the sound in the game was pretty well done. It wasn't necessarily the greatest sound. Some of the things get a little old, but overall I thought it was pretty decent. What about you? What'd you think?
Yeah, it did make me giggle, and I'm not sure if that's good. Every time you would sheath your sword after killing somebody, there was this cute little noise.
It's like a little tabla riff or
yeah,
something.
Yeah, a little weird thing, and I guess I expected that considering the way the style of these games have always been.
So in terms of the simplicity of the game, it's really nice because there's actually no tutorial outright. I guess if you turn it on there is, but I didn't do that when I was playing it. But it does a great job of just ramping up the difficulty as you play along so that you kind of learn how to do stuff that gets harder and harder as you play. Also, I should mention that the 360 version has a couple of different versions besides the normal gameplay. You can do survival mode, which is trying to beat the whole game without dying, which I think is probably almost impossible except for crazy freaks.
Right.
And then, aside from that, there's a time attack mode where you try and beat the game within a certain, you always try to beat your record. Because ideally, the whole point of the game is you're beating it within 60 minutes or else the princess is going to get killed. But, you know, they finagle it, so if you don't beat it in 60 minutes, you'll still be okay.
On the subject of replay value, is that I definitely agree that going back and trying to beat it faster or whatever, it's really great. It's a game that what you're trying to do is implement the controls into your reflexes, because you gotta avoid all kinds of hazards and whatever, and that you can just keep getting better and better.
What I always really like, and that actually translates into this new version, is that there's these couple moments in the original game where, like, you'll take this potion and it causes you to fall slowly down to the ground, or there's another part where you have to walk across an invisible bridge. Like, most of the game is pretty much the same, but then there's these one or two key moments where there's like this magical sort of mystery to it that you don't expect. And even though it's so simple, they managed to include these just key little twists, including the Dark Prince, which you'll enjoy. Also, they updated it just enough that it's a little more apt for the new audiences. There's a few newer things with the bosses, a few new little acrobatic tricks, and so they did a good job. Overall, I'd have to give Prince of Persia Classic for Xbox Live Arcade 9.5 out of 10 spiky things out of the ground.
And I totally agree. 9.5 out of 10 badass baggy pants.